Hello everyone, my name is Christian. Welcome to my hobby blog. Today we are doing a new review, a movie that I had thought I had seen years and years and years ago. And I rewatched it tonight because I got it in the recent Arrow sale, probably about a month or two, I guess 2 months ago. I got it, and I was very slow to watch it because I love the director's work. He had done The Ringu 1 and 2, and this film, which are one of the highest acclaimed J horror films of all time. This one came out after the Ringu films in 2002. And the director, of course, is Hideo Nakata. He directed Ringu films. He had done many movies in the 2000s trying to, I guess, light the spark again for the J horror genre. But it kind of just moved on from the dead girl in the water trope, which is what this movie really, really leans on. But all of that can be found out through the documentaries on this fabulous, fabulous set by Arrow, the Ringu trilogy. This is not the limited edition. I wish I had it, but the film that we are talking about today is 2002's Dark Water. This movie is so fucking creepy. There were so many spine-chilling moments. I am completely desensitized when it comes to horror films. I am rarely creeped out. Usually I'm creeped out by the effects. Like, that's about it. But Hideo Nakata is a master. I mean, everything in this movie is so well done. Everything is so well structured in terms of the script. Every scene adds on to the scene previous and builds the entire film. And the conclusion for this movie is pretty amazing. It's not as nonsensical as a lot of J horror films are. One that I immediately think of is the film Pulse, which I don't think is the same director, but that one came out around the same time as Dark Water. And I love Pulse, which I haven't talked about on this channel yet, but the ending to that movie is so bizarre, so abstract, and this movie was pretty straightforward in terms of the ending. But the story of this film is basically a mother and her daughter named Ikuko. They are going through a divorce with the father. The wife is the mom of Ikuko. And they move into a new apartment. And this apartment is not exactly what it seems. There's a lot of weird history surrounding it. One of the tenants of the place, the father disappeared, and the daughter was never to be found again. And her name was Mikio, or Mikiko, I believe. And I'm trying to find the name. It's not on the back, unfortunately. But Mikiko is kind of the last little girl in the apartment who disappeared during this really weird supernatural, I guess, somewhat similar to The Grudge or Ju-on, where every few years someone comes in and they replace the I guess the previous spirit is kind of the way that I interpret the story for this movie. But throughout the movie, they have the ceiling leaking on top of them, and they set out bowls, and every few scenes they look up, you know, when they come back to the apartment from work or from school, or having a scene where they're talking with the father, trying to negotiate custody during the divorce battle, and they look up and they see, you know, the spread of the water damage has spread. The water damage has spread, is what I was trying to say. And while they are trying to figure out why this is happening, the management of the apartment are like, oh, there's nothing wrong, like, whatever. Keep the red purse that you find. And it's really, really small, but I'll try to point out on the box. But you see Ikuko, she's in the yellow holding the basket, and there's a tiny little indication of another girl behind her. And she's holding a red purse, which is Mikiko's red purse, that they keep throwing away and it keeps coming back. So it's very creepy in that regard, but throughout the entire movie, you get little faint glimpses of Mikiko, and it is so creepy. This is what I love about the J-horror genre, is that videos are always a central tool to ramp up the suspense, because we get our first scene in the apartment when Ikuko and her mother move in, or at least are looking around, and Ikuko goes missing. She just kind of wanders away, and no one knows where she is. So the mom is frantically looking around. She's getting in the elevator, going up and down, and there's a scene, and this happens about 2 or 3 times, but it gets creepier every time, of course, where the mom is riding the elevator up to the 7th floor, which is where we find out that Mikiko has disappeared. And that's where everything kind of begins, is kind of the revelation that that's where her body may be. Very similar to the Ring films, but made by the same director, who, in that movie, Sadako, the girl who her mom shoves down a well, is very similar in terms of that plot, I guess, hook. But she's riding up the elevator, and you always see just a little head kind of in the corner when the management is watching the, I guess, the CCTV, watching the live feed from the cameras in the elevator. And you see just a head, and he's looking at it, and it takes a step forward. And the mom kind of looks around, is looking around, doesn't see Mikiko. And the next time she gets in the elevator, she just kind of really haywired out, really stressed, because Ikuko keeps disappearing, and she shows up in other apartment rooms. She shows up in the top floor of the 7th floor, which is kind of like a cursed floor, to be as simple as I can say without spoilers. But the next time that she's in there, she's just standing in the corner, Mikiko, because, I mean, that's what happens. That's the natural, I guess, ramping up of the suspense, is Mikiko having to be straight right there on the camera, on the CCTV camera, just staring right at our mother. And it is so creepy. And that's always something in J-horror movies, is in probably all of them, that there's always a CCTV scene. And there's a really, really creepy one in Ju-on, or The Grudge, which is the English translation. And there's a really creepy one where you see the amorphous, vague shape of a human, completely smoked out, kind of very, very shadowy, and they're looking right at the camera, and they slowly come at the camera, and then the hair parts, and it's like just 2 eyes. Like, anything with CCTVs and J-horror films get under my skin, because it's way too real. And I'm like looking around my apartment, and I'm just getting freaked out just talking about this movie, because there's a very specific creepy moment towards the end where our main character of Ikuko is hanging out in the apartment after her mom kind of realizes, like, oh my god, like, the red purse keeps coming back. And so she takes the purse and she goes up to the 7th floor to resolve that issue. And Ikuko is left behind in the apartment, and she hears the bathtub start to run. And bathtubs are also a very cursed location in every J horror film. I think there's always a bathtub scene where our main villain, or at least main source of stress, is always hanging out in the bathtub. And it's a similar scene, and oh my god, just thinking about it gives me chills. But Ikuko goes to the bathtub and she's trying to turn it off, and we are seeing the water kind of going up and down and bubbling. And I know there's a jet underneath it. That's how they're doing the effects, but they sell it. They really sell it. It does not take you out at all. And oh my god, I keep looking in like shadow corners, and oh my god, I need to stop. But getting freaked out here. This movie's really fucking good, okay? Believe me. I rated it 5 stars on Letterboxd. I never do that. But she's trying to turn the bathtub off because it's overflowing at this point, flowing all over the floor, while the ceiling is leaking still. The entire movie, the ceiling is leaking. But she sees that the water is being disturbed and that there's like bubbles coming up. And then 2 arms just grab her head and just push her down into the water, and she's like flailing about, and we go back to the mother. And then this is like, that part was creepy, but it does not compare to what I'm about to describe. But the mother comes back down after resolving an issue, and she finds her daughter's body by the bathtub, kind of laying there. And she's like, oh my god, what happened? Closes the water, and there's still a bit of bubbling in the bathtub, but she just grabs her daughter and just leaves. She goes to the elevator and she sits her daughter down and is like, okay, we're gonna leave. This is every supernatural movie trope ever. We're gonna leave now, but there's nothing you can do because it's too late. And she's talking to her daughter and she's finished, and she sees the door to her apartment slowly opening, and there's her daughter. Who's the little girl in the elevator with her? So she turns around and she sees the girl, and it's like the most grotesque makeup ever, and it just says "Mama" and just latches on to the mom's head. And that, I will never forget that scene. That scene, the scene in Ju-on where the babysitter is sleeping, and she sees her covers go like this for like a quick second. She's like, huh? And she lifts the covers, and the Grudge is right there screaming. That scene and this scene in this movie imprinted in my mind forever. I am sitting here and I'm like, I need to turn on every fucking light in here, because this movie is so creepy and I loved it. Very few movies make me anxious and paranoid about my space, my living space, which is a very common theme throughout J-horror films, is the horror coming from within the living space rather than outside. Because there's a lot of movies outside of Japan, like in America especially, where the horror comes from outside. We can defeat the evil, we can defeat the zombies, there's a serial killer coming after us, a slasher, we can fight them. But in Japanese horror films, especially in the 90s and 2000s, the horror originates in the home. And it is a trope that I think works well, so fucking well. So good. I love this trope. This is something I love. The Ring really touches on it. Pulse touches on that. It's very similar. It takes place in an apartment building. Dark Water, Ju-on. A little bit of A Tale of Two Sisters, which I think is Japanese. But that movie is really creepy, and I still have no idea what happens in that movie because I've seen it 5 times and I still don't know what's going on. But this movie really takes that theme up a notch, and it was wonderful. Excuse me. I am so shocked that I hadn't seen this movie before, because I know the director pretty well. He did the Ringu films. He got the cinematographer of the Ringu films to come back and do this. And this one is just so amazing. And what's crazy is that the guy who wrote the short novel Ringu, that was kind of the inspiration for the film Ringu, of course. This was Dark Water was another short novel that he wrote that this director Hideo Nakata also adapted. So I think this guy knows what he's great at, and he just needs to continue. But I was looking at his IMDb, Letterboxd, to see what other films he'd done, and not many of them have high ratings, which is very sad. But I mean, 3 films, Ju-on or Ringu 1 and 2, and Dark Water, some of my favorite of the genre. It is so good. They always do the creepy little girl trope so well. We don't have the full, like, I don't know, 3 feet long hair in this one, but it's still blanketing the girl's face, Mikiko's. And it is so creepy. Oh my god. That trope is another amazing, I guess, through line of the J horror genre. But oh my god. I just want to watch this movie again. Just talking about it, I'm like, I just want to rewatch it. This movie was so phenomenal. I can't believe it took me so long. I thought I had seen this movie, as I said, but I think I confused it for another film, and now I have to go find what that film was, because it's not Pulse, it's not Dark Water, and it's not the Ju-on films or the Ringu films. So I have no idea what that movie was that had a similar lady in the water trope. I know I've seen it. I rented it from Netflix. I just can't remember the name. But this movie, I wholeheartedly recommend. I think everyone should watch this, especially in October. I will definitely be revisiting this in Spooktober, as I call it. I did the 30-day or 31 days of horror last year, and I am so excited to do it again this year. So this will definitely become a staple for that list. But I think that's all I have to say. I do not want to go too deep into it. I know I wouldn't say an ending spoiler, but that scare, it is so effective anyways, that I think you will still be completely creeped the fuck out afterwards. So thank you guys so much for watching, and please don't forget to favorite this video, like it, whatever the terminology on YouTube is, subscribe, because the more people who watch, the more fun it can be to discuss these films. So thank you all again, and please have a great rest of the Monday. Thank you. Well, Tuesday.